The morning sunlight streamed through the courtroom windows, casting golden rays onto the dark oak bench where Judge Luna sat. The atmosphere was tense and heavy, filled with the soft murmurs of lawyers flipping through documents and spectators whispering in low voices. Rory, Luna's devoted assistant, stood nearby, leaning slightly toward her and speaking in a cautious tone. The next case is the armed robbery in Riverside County. The defendant is Jack Bennett, Rory announced softly but cautiously. Luna nodded, her eyes still fixed on the case file in front of her. She took a deep breath, adjusted the collar of her robe, and prepared herself mentally. To her, this was just another day, another case, full of serious charges and decisions that demanded utmost care. Little did she know that in just a few seconds, her entire world would be turned upside down. A police officer stepped into the room, leading a man dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit, his wrists and ankles chained. The moment Luna's gaze fell upon his face, her heart seemed to stop. Jack. It was Jack, her childhood friend. Memories flooded back like a tidal wave. Carefree afternoons running barefoot down dusty paths, and endless nights spent on rooftops talking about dreams and life. But now, standing before her, wasn't the vibrant, joyful boy she once knew. Instead, he was a weary, broken man with deep-set eyes and shoulders hunched as if bearing the weight of the world. Luna struggled to maintain her composure, her heart pounding violently within her chest. The defendant, Jack Bennett, Luna's voice rang out, though it lacked the usual confidence. You are charged with armed robbery and assault. How do you plead? Jack raised his head slowly, his gaze steady despite the roughness in his voice. Not guilty, Your Honor. His words were raw, hoarse, almost as if life had worn him down to the bones. Luna felt a heavy ache settle in her chest, suffocating her resolve. The role of a judge suddenly seemed overwhelmingly burdensome, as if the weight of justice itself had grown 1,000 times heavier. She couldn't reconcile the friend she once cherished with the man accused before her. Noise buzzed faintly through the courtroom, but to Luna, everything else faded away. All she could hear was the echo of her own heartbeat, drumming like thunder. Rory looked at her with quiet concern, subtly reminding her to regain focus. Taking a deep breath, Luna steadied herself and spoke with as much authority as she could muster. Proceed with the trial. But in her mind a relentless question lingered, gnawing at her conscience. What happened to Jack? How did everything end up like this? Luna sat motionless on the judge's bench, her gaze drifting away into the suffocating stillness of the courtroom. In that fleeting moment, the image of Jack flashed before her eyes, not the weary, hardened man he was now, but the boy from years ago, with that vibrant, mischievous smile. Memories surged like a relentless tide, dragging her back to the impoverished outskirts where two children once found solace in each other, defying the harsh realities of their world. Back then, Luna and Jack grew up in rundown houses on the edge of town, where dusty roads stretched endlessly into the horizon. Despite the meager lives they led, those days were filled with laughter and boundless dreams. They would run barefoot along the dirt paths, their voices echoing through the fields, while the sun dipped low on the distant hills. On quiet evenings, they lay sprawled on the grass, looking up at the sky tinged with hues of red and gold, speaking of distant lands and brighter futures, of leaving the small, unforgiving town behind and making something of themselves. But life, cruel and unrelenting, had other plans. One sweltering afternoon, as Luna and Jack sat on the creaky wooden steps of her house, her father appeared. His stern, rigid face darkened as he spotted Jack sitting beside his daughter. His voice, cold and commanding, cut through the humid air like a knife. Luna, get inside, now! Luna glanced at Jack, her heart pounding, but he only smiled faintly, bravely, as if shielding her from the harsh reality. "Go on," he whispered, his tone laced with resignation. "I'll be fine." That was the last time they truly saw each other. The following day, Luna's father forbade her from seeing Jack again, warning her of the consequences. She waited by the old wooden fence every evening, hoping Jack would show up, but he never did. A few weeks later, she heard from neighbors that his family had moved away, vanished without a trace. The void left behind was heavy and unforgiving, and Luna found herself drowning in regret. Years passed and Luna buried herself in her studies, determined to escape the town and become a lawyer. She vowed to protect justice, to stand strong for the weak and oppressed. But despite her success, a hollow ache remained, a relentless reminder of the boy she had once called her friend. Now, standing in the courtroom, Luna couldn't help but wonder. Was it her own fear and compliance that left Jack vulnerable to the harsh world they both once despised? Did she abandon him when he needed her most? The prosecutor's voice snapped her back to reality, slicing through her guilt with its clinical precision. But Luna knew that no matter how impartial she forced herself to be, the real trial was within her own heart, a trial of conscience and redemption. Luna tried to maintain her composure, but the gavel in her hand trembled slightly. Below the judge's bench, Jack stood motionless, his shoulders hunched, eyes hollow and weary. He didn't look at anyone, as if he had already resigned himself to whatever judgment awaited him. Luna's heart throbbed with a deep, aching pain, but as a judge, she couldn't let emotions cloud her judgment. Justice had to prevail, even if it tore her apart from the inside. The prosecutor stepped forward, a middle-aged man with piercing eyes and a stern voice that sliced through the tension like a knife. He cast a disdainful glance at Jack, as if he had already made up his mind that this worn-out man was undoubtedly guilty. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, his voice sharp and unyielding, "the defendant, Jack Bennett, is charged with armed robbery and assault at a convenience store in Riverside County. On the night in question, he allegedly broke into the store, assaulted the clerk, and stole all the cash from the register." Luna listened intently, forcing herself to focus on the details of the case rather than the swirling turmoil in her mind. She glanced at Jack, still silent, his face etched with a sadness that seemed almost unbearable. What had happened to him? How had life pushed him to this point? The prosecutor then presented a critical piece of evidence, a surveillance video from the store. Luna narrowed her eyes, studying the grainy footage on the screen. A shadowy figure in a red hoodie lunged at the counter, the movements frantic and violent. The image was blurry, barely discernible, and Luna couldn't help but feel a sense of doubt gnawing at her thoughts. Justin, the defense attorney, stepped forward with calm determination. His voice was clear and composed, cutting through the prosecutor's accusations like a blade of reason. "Your Honor, we must question the validity of this video. The quality is abysmal, and there is no conclusive evidence proving that the person shown is Jack Bennett." The prosecutor scoffed, but Justin continued unfazed. "Furthermore, no physical evidence links my client to the scene. There was no DNA match, no fingerprints, and most importantly, no red hoodie was recovered from the suspect when apprehended." The tension in the courtroom thickened. Some members of the jury exchanged wary glances, and Luna caught herself holding her breath. Rory, standing quietly to the side, glanced at Luna with a hint of concern. Justin pressed on, his voice unwavering. "Your Honor, the prosecution's case rests solely on circumstantial evidence and an unclear video recording. We cannot convict a man based solely on assumptions and preconceived notions. Justice demands that we see beyond stereotypes and ensure that fairness prevails." Luna struggled to keep her mind clear, but each word cut deeper, forcing her to confront the harsh reality that maybe, just maybe, Jack was innocent. The room seemed to pulse with the weight of doubt, and Luna knew that this wasn't just about a verdict. It was a reckoning with her own conscience. She tapped the gavel gently, summoning all her strength to project authority despite the storm raging inside her. Proceed with presenting further evidence and witnesses. But even as she spoke, Luna couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that justice itself was on trial and that the cost of a wrong decision would haunt her for the rest of her life. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew even more tense, suffocating like a shroud of impending doom. Luna sat upright on the judge's bench, her hands gripping the gavel tightly as if it were the only anchor keeping her grounded. Rory stood by her side, her worried eyes reflecting Luna's inner turmoil. Luna knew she had to put aside her emotions, but the gnawing ache in her chest was impossible to ignore. Justin, the defense attorney, stepped forward with a determined expression. His voice cut through the silence like a blade, confident and unwavering. Your Honor, we intend to prove that this case is riddled with inconsistencies and that the truth has been overlooked. He called the arresting officer to the stand, a middle-aged man with a worn face and a rigid posture. Justin fixed his gaze on him, his tone sharp yet controlled. Officer Miller, you were the one who apprehended Jack Bennett on the night of the alleged crime, correct? Yes, sir, the officer responded, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying a hint of unease. Justin nodded, flipping through his notes before continuing. And at that time, what led you to believe that Mr. Bennett was the suspect? The officer cleared his throat, glancing briefly at the prosecutor for reassurance. He matched the description, a black male, mid-30s, wearing dark clothing. Justin's eyebrows rose slightly, his tone carefully neutral. Dark clothing? The surveillance footage clearly shows the suspect wearing a red hoodie. Did you find a red hoodie on Mr. Bennett during the arrest? The officer hesitated, his lips pressed tightly together. No, we didn't find any hoodie. Justin took a measured step closer, his voice growing firmer. Did you or any other officers conduct a search of the surrounding area to locate the alleged hoodie? Officer Miller shifted uncomfortably, his hands tightening on the edges of the witness stand. No, we didn't have time. He was apprehended quickly. A murmur spread through the courtroom, and Luna couldn't help but notice the skeptical glances exchanged among the jurors. Justin continued, unfazed. So just to clarify, you arrested my client without finding the key piece of evidence that supposedly identified him as the suspect? The officer's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. Justin turned to address the jury, his voice calm and unwavering. Justice demands thorough investigation, not snap judgments based on vague descriptions. We cannot convict a man on assumptions and lack of evidence. Next, Justin called an expert witness, a forensic analyst specializing in video analysis. The analyst presented his findings, confirming that the video footage was too grainy and low quality to make any positive identification. Furthermore, he pointed out that the timestamp on the footage appeared altered, raising serious doubts about its authenticity. Are you suggesting that the video evidence may have been tampered with? Justin asked, his voice low and piercing. Yes, the analyst replied. There are clear indications of edits and discrepancies in the timestamp, which should be investigated further. The prosecutor attempted to discredit the expert, but the seed of doubt had already been planted in the minds of the jurors. Luna could see their expressions shift, the certainty they had earlier now clouded with uncertainty. Finally, Justin called Jack himself to the stand. Jack walked slowly, chains clinking softly as he sat down, his posture stoic but his eyes weary. Taking a deep breath, he spoke with a raw sincerity that reverberated through the room. "I've made mistakes in my life. I've been in trouble before, but I didn't do this. That night I was just walking home. They didn't ask me anything. They just decided I was guilty because I looked like the guy in the video. But I'm not that man." His voice cracked slightly, and Luna felt a knot tighten in her chest. Jack's words carried more than just a plea for innocence. They bore the weight of a lifetime of being judged without proof. Justin turned back to the jury, his final words soft but powerful. "We cannot let prejudice and incomplete evidence destroy a man's life. Justice must be blind, not biased." As Jack left the stand, Luna forced herself to remain composed, but the truth gnawed at her conscience like a relentless storm. She knew that this trial wasn't just about determining Jack's guilt or innocence. It was about confronting the flawed system that had failed him. Luna glanced at Rory, who offered a supportive nod, sensing the conflict raging within her. Taking a deep breath, Luna knew that the weight of justice was heavier than ever before. Whatever the verdict, she had to ensure that truth, not assumption, would prevail. After Justin completed his defense argument, the atmosphere in the courtroom fell into a profound silence. Luna remained seated at the judge's bench, her hand gripping the wooden gavel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Below her, Jack stood motionless, his shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on the ground as if bracing for the inevitable. The weight of justice pressed down on Luna like a crushing burden, tearing her apart from within. Beneath the stillness, Luna's mind raced through the memories once more. Carefree afternoons racing barefoot on dusty roads, dreams shared under the endless sky. But now those memories felt like a cruel reminder of what was lost, of the friend who had once been her entire world. She couldn't help but wonder how they had arrived at this moment, how life had warped and scarred Jack into the man standing accused before her. A soft nudge on her shoulder pulled her back to the present. Rory whispered with concern, "Judge Luna, are you okay?" Luna forced a weak smile, but the turmoil in her heart betrayed her calm facade. She knew that this was more than just a trial. It was a reckoning, a confrontation with the choices she had made and the ones she failed to make. The jury filed out to deliberate, and Luna remained at her bench, her mind wrestling with itself. Was she really serving justice, or merely upholding a flawed system that had failed Jack from the start? Could she truly be impartial when her heart was screaming in protest? Time seemed to stretch on endlessly. The murmurs of the audience faded into an oppressive silence, broken only when the jury finally returned. The foreman, a stern-faced woman, held the verdict in trembling hands, her expression unreadable. Luna steadied herself, forcing her voice to remain composed. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman nodded, unfolding the paper. "In the case of Riverside County versus Jack Bennett, we find the defendant not guilty." The room erupted in a collective gasp, some in relief, others in shock. Luna struck the gavel against the wood, her voice firm despite the tears stinging her eyes. "The court finds the defendant not guilty. Mr. Bennett, you are free to go. Court is adjourned." As the crowd began to disperse, Jack remained standing in stunned silence, as if struggling to comprehend his freedom. He looked up, his gaze meeting Luna's. For a fleeting moment, they just stared at each other, worlds apart yet irrevocably linked. Jack's lips parted, but he didn't speak. He simply lowered his head and walked toward the exit, his steps slow and uncertain. When the courtroom had nearly emptied, Jack approached the bench, his face etched with a mixture of hurt and confusion. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "You didn't say anything. You knew me, but you didn't speak up." Luna's heart twisted painfully. She took a shaky breath, her voice barely steady. "I couldn't, Jack. If I had revealed our connection, it would have compromised the entire trial. Justice demands impartiality, even if it hurts." Jack gave a bitter smile, his eyes reflecting years of pain and betrayal. Impartiality. That's the problem, isn't it? Justice doesn't feel so fair when it's people like me on trial. Luna's shoulders sagged, guilt washing over her in waves. She wanted to reach out, to tell him how sorry she was, but the words wouldn't come. Jack gave a small, almost imperceptible nod before turning away. He didn't look back as he walked through the courthouse doors, his silhouette swallowed by the fading light. Left alone in the empty courtroom, Luna sat motionless, the echoes of his words reverberating in her mind. Had she truly delivered justice, or had she merely maintained the illusion of it? The line between right and wrong had never felt so blurred. She knew that no matter what the verdict had been, she had lost something precious that day, something that could never be reclaimed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Luna wiped a stray tear from her cheek and made a solemn vow to herself. If justice meant more than just following the letter of the law, then she would strive to be better. Not just a judge who ruled with her head, but one who listened with her heart. Justice was not just a concept to be upheld. It was a promise to protect the innocent and understand the guilty. And Luna knew that her journey toward true justice had only just begun. The courtroom was empty now, the echoes of the verdict still lingering in the air. A few clerks were tidying up, stacking papers and shutting down equipment. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long golden shadows across the wooden floor. Luna remained seated at the judge's bench, motionless, her fingers tracing the smooth surface of the gavel. The door creaked open softly and footsteps echoed through the quiet space. Luna didn't look up at first, lost in her own thoughts. But then a familiar voice, low and filled with a weariness that made her heart ache, broke the silence. "So, that's it, huh?" Luna slowly raised her gaze and saw Jack standing a few feet away, his posture still guarded, eyes weary but holding a glimmer of something she couldn't quite name. Relief, bitterness, or perhaps both. He hesitated, as if unsure whether to come closer or keep his distance. After a moment, he spoke again, his voice quieter than before. "You knew, didn't you? You knew it was me the whole time." Luna swallowed hard, struggling to keep her emotions in check. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I couldn't say anything. If I had, it would have jeopardized the trial. Justice demands impartiality, Jack. I had to be fair." Jack let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Fair? That's what you call it. You didn't speak up, not once. You just sat there, acting like I was just another case, like I wasn't, like we weren't." He trailed off, frustration evident in his expression. Luna felt a lump form in her throat, but she forced herself to keep looking at him, refusing to hide from the truth. "I'm sorry, Jack. I should have done more back then. I should have stood up for you, fought for you, but I was young, scared, and I didn't know how to go against what was expected of me." Jack lowered his head, letting out a long, shaky breath. "We were just kids. I didn't blame you for leaving me behind, not at first. But then life kept kicking me down, and I kept wondering, what if you'd stayed? What if you'd fought for us back then?" Luna's heart ached with every word, guilt sinking deeper into her chest. She wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but she knew that no gesture could undo the years of pain he had endured. "I can't change the past," she whispered, "but I promise I'll fight harder now. For you, for people like you. I owe you that much." Jack looked at her for a long moment, his expression softening just a fraction. There was a flicker of acceptance in his eyes, but also a lingering sadness that couldn't be erased. "You know, justice isn't just about verdicts. It's about giving people a chance, about understanding where they come from and why they ended up where they are. I just wanted someone to see me for more than what the world decided I was." Luna felt the weight of his words pressed down on her like a crushing burden. "I see you now, Jack, and I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner." He gave a faint nod, as if acknowledging the sincerity in her voice. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his silhouette framed by the fading light through the courtroom doors. Luna remained seated, staring at the empty space where he had stood, her heart aching with remorse and determination. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Luna whispered to herself, making a silent vow. "I will change this. I will fight for those who don't have a voice. No one should ever be left behind like that again." She knew it wouldn't be easy. The system was rigid and unyielding, shaped by decades of prejudice and blind justice. But Luna was determined to use her position not just to uphold the law, but to transform it, to make it truly just. Justice wasn't about proving guilt or innocence alone. It was about understanding the stories behind those who stood trial. And for Luna, it was time to give justice a new meaning, one rooted not just in judgment, but in compassion and humanity. The night had fallen, wrapping the city in a quiet, somber stillness. Luna stood at the steps of the courthouse, staring into the darkness, lost in thought. The heavy wooden doors behind her had closed, sealing away the echoes of the trial that had just ended. Rory stood beside her, her presence quiet and supportive, but her eyes filled with concern. "Are you all right?" Rory asked gently, placing a hand on Luna's shoulder. Luna didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked out at the dimly lit streets, her voice barely audible. "Rory, what does justice really mean? Is it just about following the rules? Or is it about doing what's truly right for people?" Rory hesitated, sensing the turmoil within her friend. "You did what the law required, Luna. You upheld the system. But justice isn't just about rules and verdicts. Sometimes it's about understanding the person behind the crime and giving them a fair chance." Luna let out a shaky breath, her thoughts swirling in chaos. "I thought I knew what justice was. I thought it was about making decisions without bias, without emotion. But today I realized how much I've been missing. Jack wasn't just a case. He was a person who had been crushed by the very system I swore to protect. And I didn't see it until it was almost too late." Rory nodded slowly, her expression gentle. "It's not easy to admit that, Luna, but recognizing it is the first step toward change." Luna's shoulders sagged under the weight of her own conscience. "I was so focused on doing everything by the book, on being impartial, that I forgot to see the humanity in it all. I let my fear of breaking protocol blind me to the truth, and because of that, I almost condemned an innocent man." Silence settled between them, broken only by the distant hum of traffic. Rory looked at Luna with a hint of encouragement. "You have the power to make a difference, Luna, to change how justice is served. You've always had that power. You just needed to see it for yourself." A sense of resolve slowly filled Luna's chest, pushing away the regret that had suffocated her earlier. She knew she couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the hurt Jack had endured, but she could change how she approached justice moving forward. Justice wasn't just about delivering a verdict, it was about listening, understanding, and being brave enough to challenge the flaws in the system. It was about seeing people as more than just defendants or criminals, but as human beings with stories worth hearing. Luna glanced at Rory, a new determination gleaming in her eyes. I'm going to do better. I'm going to make sure that no one else falls through the cracks like Jack did. From now on, I won't just be a judge. I'll be a protector of those who have no voice, no hope. I owe him that much. Rory gave a small, proud smile. You've always had that spirit, Luna. You just needed a reason to let it show. As they stood on the courthouse steps, the wind brushed past them, carrying away the remnants of doubt and guilt. Luna knew that her journey had only just begun. The fight for true justice would not be easy. It would be met with resistance and skepticism. But for Jack and for everyone else who had been overlooked, she would fight with everything she had. Luna took one last look at the darkened cityscape, the stars slowly emerging in the night sky, and whispered to herself, justice isn't just a verdict, it's a responsibility, a promise to protect those who can't protect themselves. And with that resolve burning brightly within her, Luna knew that she would never let fear or doubt dictate her choices again. She would be the kind of judge who not only upheld the law, but also embraced humanity, compassion, and truth. As the city lights flickered on, Luna remained on the courthouse steps, her heart finally finding a sense of calm amid the chaos of her thoughts. The wind whispered through the narrow alleys, carrying the lingering echoes of the trial that had shaken her to the core. She had upheld the law, but deep down, she knew that justice was far more than following protocols and issuing verdicts. Luna closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting the crisp night air fill her lungs. Jack's words echoed in her mind, words that held both pain and truth. He had been right. Justice had failed him, and not just today, but from the very beginning. It wasn't just about legal procedures or proving innocence. It was about acknowledging the humanity behind the crime, understanding the pain and struggle that led someone to the brink. Rory stood silently beside her, sensing the weight of Luna's thoughts but giving her the space to process it all. After a long pause, Luna finally spoke, her voice low and contemplative. I thought I knew what justice meant, Rory. I thought it was about being impartial and steadfast, but I was wrong. Justice isn't just about the law. It's about doing what's right for people. It's about seeing beyond the guilt or innocence and understanding why someone ended up in front of me. Rory gave a slight nod, offering her quiet support. You can make a difference, Luna. You've always had the power to change things. You just needed to believe in it. Luna looked up at the darkened sky, the stars flickering like fragile hopes in the vast expanse. She knew she couldn't change the past or undo the pain Jack had endured, but she could fight to make the future better, not just for him, but for all those who had been overlooked and discarded by the system. With a newfound resolve, Luna whispered to herself, I'll make justice more than just a word. I'll make it a promise, a commitment to protect those who can't protect themselves. No more being blind to the truth. No more turning away. She knew it wouldn't be easy. The system was entrenched in tradition, resistant to change. But Luna wasn't afraid anymore. The fire in her heart had been rekindled, not just by guilt or regret, but by the realization that she could be more than just a passive enforcer of the law. She could be a catalyst for change. As the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, Luna took one last look at the courthouse behind her, a solemn reminder of both duty and responsibility. Then, with determination etched into every step, she walked forward, into a new day, ready to make justice not just a verdict, but a way of life. Justice, she realized, wasn't just about the law. It was about fighting for those whose stories had been silenced. It was about giving a voice to the voiceless and a chance to those who had been forgotten. And Luna knew that she would never forget that again. The story of Luna and Jack reminds us that justice is not just about rigid judgments or blindly following the law. In life, we must learn to see people with empathy and compassion rather than judging them based on appearances or societal biases. Everyone has their own story, pain, struggles, and reasons behind their actions. Listen, understand, and seek true justice, not just with logic, but with heart. By choosing to look beyond assumptions and stereotypes, we can make a difference in creating a fairer and more humane world.